Are you looking to buy a home? Here are my top 3 tips to win that home. I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and throughout that time and a lot of different markets, I wanted to share with you all of the tactics and tips that I personally and professionally used with my clients to help them win that home regardless of the market conditions. First and foremost, and this is a very important stage, this is what I call the information gathering stage. We need to understand a few things before we really jump in and put together our tactic and strategy. During this information gathering stage, we first and foremost, we need to understand what the fair market value of the home is. How do we do that? We do a comparative market analysis for every home that our buyer is interested in. This is very much similar to what we would do for a seller when we were looking to price their home. We want to make sure that just because it has a list price, that the market value aligns with that list price. Because a seller can put any number on its listing, on its house. So that's the first thing that we ever do, is we want to make sure that the valuation is similar to what we want to pay and where we want to be. Now, as I've told every one of my clients in the last few years, valuing residential real estate is a little bit the bane of my existence. It was a lousy career choice when it comes from that perspective, because obviously I do a lot of valuing residential real estate. Residential real estate exists in a bit of a gray area. The reason why it exists in a gray area is because of us. It's human element. There is so much human element ingested and involved in what one buyer is willing to pay and one seller is willing to take. Now you put that on repeat time and time again, and that's where we get these ranges. So when we talk about what a home is worth in the market or the fair market value, it is that range of what we're talking about. Now, different markets will create different pressures within that range. For example, if a market is very competitive, we expect the home to sell at the high end of the range or perhaps above the range. If it is a softer market, we expect it to be on the lower end of the range or even possibly below, depending on market circumstances. But once again, we need to start with understanding what we think the home is worth before we can put any other strategies into place. What else is important in our information gathering stage? Understanding seller motivation. Why are they selling? What is their desired timeline? Where are they moving to? Have they found a house? There are so many other things that we need to know. The more that we know that is important to the seller, the more we can curtail our offer to be pleasing to them. Sometimes that pleasing gets us a better price. Sometimes that pleasing in a competitive market makes us the winner above the competition. But without understanding what's important to that seller, we don't know how to structure that offer. So after we get the fair market value, then we understand the seller motivation. What's up next? There's one more thing that we want to understand before we really start to strategize, and that's understanding the market conditions. Are we in a competitive market? Are we expected to be in a multiple bid? Is this property something that just came on the market and it's a hot property? Or has it been sitting on the market for a while and it's gotten a little lackluster, so to say? Those are going to be different strategies. All of this information should be things that are being discussed throughout the buying process, because here's what I can tell you. As a buyer, if you're just having these conversations, once you get to the point in which you are looking to write an offer, that can be a lot for a buyer to digest. So understanding the market conditions and what kind of negotiation you are going to be stepping into should be an active conversation with your chosen agent from the very, very beginning. All of this information is imperative for us to write a successful offer that actually helps us to secure and win that home. Okay, so we've done our information gathering. Now we need to talk about our negotiation strategy. We just write up an offer and that's it, right? No. There are different strategies based on the markets that we're getting into. There's going to be 3 strategies that I talk about here. We're going to have our multiple bid scenario, we're going to have a competitive market with no multiple bid, and then we're going to have a normal market. Those are the 3 markets that I'm going to dive into. Now, first and foremost, the multiple bid. Spring market for the last 4 years has been incredibly competitive. Our objective in this is to write an offer that is going to be the most appealing to the seller in comparison to all the other offers they're looking at. A multiple bid can have 2 offers. A multiple bid can have 24 offers. I had that last year. Trust me, I had 24 offers on a home that we were listing. Everyone says that the seller must be thrilled. It's a terrible process when you have 24 offers because 23 people are very upset with you. Nobody ever wants to be with it. But it is competitive whether you have 2 or any more than 2. Now, once again, when we're trying to make something that is so compelling to the sellers, we have to understand it's not just price. I cannot tell you how many times my clients have been the winning offer, the one to secure the home without having the highest price. What else goes into it? So much. The closing date, the possession date. There can be a difference between those two. Just because you close on one day doesn't mean the sellers have to move out at that time. We could do something like a rent back or a free rent back, or we can do something in which they are doing different strategies. Contingencies, safety nets. Contingencies give the buyers protection in this. They give the buyers the opportunity to walk away from the contract. So if we minimize contingencies or if we waive contingencies, that's going to be something very desirable to a seller, especially if I know what's important to that seller. The other things that are also important for us to understand, the strength of the team. I cannot tell you how important this is when we're looking at multiple offers. That as a seller's agent, when I'm discussing those offers with my clients, we look at all the terms. We look at who the buyer's agent is, who the attorney is, who the inspector is. We look at who the lender is, all of these people, because there are going to be some teams that we have a tremendous amount of confidence in their track record. We know they're out there on a very high level doing a lot of business that gives us a lot of confidence. I say it to my clients all the time. If a highest offer and a best written offer can't get to the finish line, it doesn't matter what's on that paper. It never will make it there. So we look for the best, strongest terms that are coupled with the highest likelihood to hit the finish. That's really what we're looking for. So I think that that's important. The other thing that we're going to start to see more in the future is commission structure. Right? Thanks to the decoupling of commissions, we now have another aspect that we can negotiate moving forward. Cash offers especially. Every buyer that I'm working with that is putting forth a cash offer, lower the price point, get that commission out of there, lower the tax basis, lower so many aspects of it, and still end up netting the same numbers. So in that, we are basically trying to use all of these moving pieces to create an environment and a team that gives the seller the most amount of confidence to get forward. Now, similar to that, but a slight deviation is going to be entering in and trying to win a negotiation in a competitive market, but not a multiple bid. Now, this could be under a lot of different avenues. Sometimes we're getting into a house early. Sometimes we're getting into it before the masses do. Sometimes we have that luxury in a competitive market. And if we do, there are certain things that are very important. First and foremost, we still need to create that offer that the seller is willing to take. And now we have to create it in a way that they're willing to take without trying to manufacture a multiple bid. How do we do that? Number one, we want the offer to be incredibly clean and incredibly favorable. We need to know that it's giving the seller either everything that they've asked for or possibly, get this, even more than what they expect. If we give them what they're expecting or more, then at that point in time, they might say, hey, you know what? I don't need to go through the hassle of a competitive offer. Maybe I'll take it just as is. We're essentially creating an offer that makes the seller feel that perhaps it's too good to be true or too good to say no to. Now, when would we do that? There's a couple of different instances. First and foremost, if we have something in our offer package that may be perceived as a slight weakness. Now, once again, not weakness in the general scope of a market, but in a competitive situation. For example, perhaps we have a client that's putting down 10% instead of 20%. That differential could get us kicked out in a sea of 10 offers. But on our own, if we write something very strong and very compelling with a quick timeline, that can make us the winner for certain. Sometimes we have to understand also for our buyers. I know that there's sometimes a question or concern of paying full price. Well, in a competitive market where there's not enough homes and a lot of things get to be a competitive situation, I tell people sometimes paying list price will be the best price we can get on a home. And we see that time and time again. In these competitive markets, oftentimes the final sales price will exceed the list price. So if we can sneak in and present something really favorable that is at the list price or maybe slightly above, we could absolutely be winning the day then. Of course, at some point in time, we will not be in a competitive market. So in a normal market, we still have very strong objectives that we're trying to accomplish. In a normal market, we want to essentially create an offer that compels a seller to come off of their numbers, right? How do we compel somebody to come off of numbers and to do something that's more favorable for us? There's a couple of things that we need to understand in this. I always say that seller psychology is something very important in a normal negotiation. We have to understand whether they do this consciously or subconsciously. When a seller first receives the offer, they are going to look at the numbers, they are going to split the difference, and they are going to associate with that number in the middle. It's right then that their brain either flips a switch to say, this is doable, or it does not and says, this isn't going anywhere. The entire negotiation and the course of it will be based off of the sentiment off of that middle ground. That's a very important thing to note as we move forward. The other thing that's very important to know that I think a lot of people forget, a negotiation is not only what we do on our side, but also what we can motivate a seller to do on their side. That is a very important tactic to note, because between these two aspects, this can really help to make or break a negotiation. We are up to our third tip. Our offer must be as clean as possible. And as we talked about, it is not just price. I think that's the third time I've said that now, but I really want, if you take anything away from this, take that away. We need to reduce our contingencies. The most normal contingencies that we tend to see are going to be our attorney approval, our inspection, and our mortgage contingency. Now, first and foremost, each one of these can be navigated on their own. We can shorten the timelines. A shorter timeline reduces a seller's risk. These are typically not ones that we want to waive, but there's ways that we can modify them to be more in the interest of the seller. With regards to the attorney approval, we can shorten the timeline. With regards to the inspection, we always want to do an inspection, especially if we are going to do something like take it in as-is condition. To take a home in as-is condition means we can do an inspection, we can ask every question that we want, we can cancel a contract, but we're essentially saying we're not going to ask the seller to repair, modify, or give a credit for anything that is found. That is something that in a multiple bid is definitely giving confidence to the seller moving forward because it streamlines the process. The mortgage contingency. This is another place where we have a lot of play. First and foremost, we can shorten the timeline on it. Our top lenders can get mortgages done in 8 days. So to have a shorter contingency here is definitely beneficial. The other thing that we see sometimes is people will waive that contingency completely if they are 100% fully approved. And what that means is they are still subject to getting a mortgage, but the contract is not contingent on it. Now, this one has a lot of red tape around it. So if you have this idea, this is something to dive in with your agent and your lender to fully understand. But there is the possibility to waive that mortgage contingency to make you more comparable to a cash offer, but still subject to getting a mortgage. The closing timeline. This is something that is very important to sellers. What day is most beneficial for them to close? Do they need to close, and do they need to rent back the home? Have they found anything yet? What is their end goal, and how do you support that? That is an active conversation with their agent so that you can do it. A lot of times, if they need to stay after, why don't we let them stay for free? Give them what we call a free rent back, so that once again, their timeline between their closing and their possession can absolutely be something. I always say you never want to lose a home because of a timeline, even if it isn't as beneficial to you. The commission structure. This is going to be a newer thing that we tend to see. The way that we use the commission structure could give people the advantages in a competitive situation. We have our cash offers that can absolutely remove that from the discussion and the equation. We also have lenders that we team up with that are incredibly skilled with regards to adding that commission back to the mortgage where it's maybe not part of the actual offer discussion. So between those two elements, we have tools and keys to once again make it more successful for us to write a better offer. Not only are the terms important, but we also have the responsibility of the presentation. How do we present the offer? I make sure that every offer that we have goes over with a clean clear, concise cover letter that highlights all of the best parts of the offer, as well as highlights all the things that maybe the seller doesn't understand about the buyer, about the team, about everything, really making us stand out. It's not just a, here's our offer, let us know if you like it. It's a page-long cover letter, making sure that everything is articulated well, because what I'm doing is I'm showing somebody how much attention to detail our team has, and we are going to address every aspect of it with that same attention to detail. I am growing confidence from the very first thing we do. In addition to growing confidence, it's the quality of the representation, the quality of the team. I know I've said it before, but understanding that who your agent is, who your lender is, who your attorney is, who your inspector are, how their reputations, how they work with other agents is absolutely a differentiator between winning and not winning the offer. I can't tell you how many lower offers have gotten accepted either from me or by me because of who was associated with it and the confidence that that team brought forth. So that is a very important lesson here, is to make sure you are aligning yourself with the right people. Okay, so some days it's not going to be competitive, and in our normal market scenario, there are still some very important things to understand. The cleanliness of the offer is still incredibly important. In a negotiation, there is give and there is take. So we always encourage our clients to give on pieces that might not be as important to us. Write strength in things that don't have as much impact, so that then we can take more on what is important to us. So if we give on everything, maybe we can take on price. Or if date's really important, then we have to give on something else. It is an ongoing piece, but understanding the value of all the different pieces and what's important to those sellers help us to write an offer that we would consider very strong and very clean from this perspective. And I think that's really important for us to note, that while we do this, the initial offer sets the tone. That is incredibly important. It doesn't matter what happens after that, it's how we set the tone. I have a lot of clients that come to me and they say, hey, Amanda, let's just try this number. Let's just see what the reaction is. Here's what I'm gonna tell you. I already explained it before. When the seller gets the offer, they automatically make a decision of whether or not this is moving in a positive direction. If you don't get them to flip that switch, the likelihood of you getting the responses that you're looking for is very, very low. I always tell people, get the seller on board, get them moving in our direction. If we dig our heels in at the very end, we're gonna have a better result than if we dig our heels in at the beginning. Think of it. If you're $10,000 apart, the likelihood of bridging that gap is much higher than if you're 30, 40, or 50. So understanding how the seller might be feeling in this and the way to help coerce them, am I allowed to use that word? How do we coerce them all for their numbers? That's really important for us to kind of understand and know. These pieces, as we use them, are what I call negotiation wedges. So for example, with a negotiation wedge, I might know that we want a 30-day closing. I might know the seller wants a 30-day closing too. I might write an offer with a 45 to 60-day closing just because I can then use that wedge to help bridge a gap later on. In a competitive market, I don't get to use those things as much, but in a more normal market, I can push on certain things so that then we have things to give back on so that we have a more successful discussion. And the number one thing that I try and do in a more normal transaction, a more normal negotiation, is, if at all possible, try to end on a positive note. You have to remember that the negotiation of the contract is the first of several negotiations. It's a terrible saying, but if you leave a seller feeling raped and pillaged at the end of a negotiation, you have to continue discussions with somebody that feels incredibly beaten down. Trying to find that win-win can definitely save money and get better results in the end. So let's remember, price is only a small part of these negotiations, where each transaction is different. Understanding the seller's motivation, understanding the market conditions, understanding the fair market value, understanding all of these different aspects can only help to set you up for success, so that you and your trusted advisor can put forth the offer that helps you actually win the home.